And now I'm going to pass this over to Zoe. I'm going to get her pinned. There you go. All right, Zoe, you have the floor. Thank you very much.
All right. Hi, everybody. So feel free to hit the chat, if your view isn't what you think it might be, but I should be like full screen for everyone, right? Mine didn't change. Okay, cool. Well, welcome to the Cellars of Jasper Hill. Here I am in our amazing subterranean cheese cave facility. So we have 7 vaults like the one that I'm in right now. This is our Cheddar vault, very appropriate for the afternoon. And I'm in what's called the Northeast Kingdom of Vermont, which means the most lightly populated and remote part along the Canadian border. And this is where Jasper Hill Farm was founded. So I'm right in the backyard of the original Jasper Hill Farm. So I'm going to tell you about the cave that I'm in and the work that we're doing here for the 2 cheeses that you're tasting today. But also I have one slide just as a little bit of background on Jasper Hill in general. So let's see here. I think I'll do it like this. And can you see?
Yes.
That slide? Okay, great. So pictured here with our brand new copper vats that we just imported from the Jura Mountains are Andy and Matteo Keeler. So they're the brothers who started this farm, and that's almost 20 years ago now. We'll be celebrating our 20th anniversary this summer. So if you've been meaning to come visit Vermont, I urge you to do it in mid-August when we're having just a gigantic celebration. There'll be a lot of roasted pigs and fireworks and fun. So this is our new creamery. So this, where they're standing here, is connected to the original farmhouse that they built, connected to an old dairy barn. So they really started this in a bootstrap way. They found a rundown barn that hadn't been used in a generation. They spent less on the whole farm than I think I did on my house. And the reason that farms were affordable was because a bunch of them were going out of business in the late 90s, early 2000s when they made the leap. The reason for that is that milk prices were at an all-time low, really hard for small-scale farms like we have in Vermont here to keep up with that up and down commodity milk price. So from the beginning, they figured there'd be an opportunity to put their hands on a farm and then to make a value-added product. So instead of selling liquid milk for commodity prices, which are really unstable, you would turn your milk into the most valuable thing you can make out of milk, which is cheese, and not just any cheese, but fancy natural rind European style cheese. And then instead of having to sell milk for a variable price, they could kind of take their destiny by the reins and have a full value product that they could get directly to the market. So that was the original plan. They built a little house connected to that rundown barn. They fixed the barn up. They got 40 Ayrshire cows in there. They had a cheese making room on the ground floor, aging cellars in the basement, and Matteo and his family still live above the creamery, connected to the barn in a little apartment above the creamery. Andy lives next door. He's smart. He got, a couple 100 yards away from the action at least. And that was the plan. They just wanted to create this model for value-added agriculture, but really early on, we had an opportunity to work with Cabot Creamery. So you notice the word Cabot on your label. You can see that it's co-branded. It's both Jasper Hill Farm and it's Cabot Cooperative Creamery. So they're 10 miles up the road. They're literally our neighbors. And they saw all of this growing energy and enthusiasm in the specialty world for high-end artisan cheeses, especially imported British clothbound cheddars. And they would go and see these new cheese shops opening, and they would, or cut to order counters and or a nice restaurant, and then they would see the Cabot cheeses in the deli or the dairy and not on the cut to order specialty case. And so Cabot really wanted to participate in all this excitement around these artisan cheeses, but the work that we're doing in the vaults behind me, the growing of the flora on the rind, and the sort of the extra labor and mess and special facility it takes to do that was not in their plan. So they basically put out a bat signal to the artisan cheese making world and said, is anybody down to help us cave ripen a cheddar? And Andy and Matteo were just selling their first pieces of cheese. They were hungry to help fill up the shelves and get a little check every month for their affinage or cheese ripening services. That's the French word for cheese ripening. Affinage comes from the French words affin, the end, so the cheese finishing process. So they got a little affinage check every month for growing a rind on that Cabot cheddar. And at the end of the year, it tasted great, but Cabot was like, great, you've got like a couple dozen wheels and we don't even want to put it on our truck because it's covered with mold. And they're talking to different buyers than Andy Mateo were, who were directly on the phone with shops and restaurants across the country. As this upstart, we didn't ever had enough weight to get a refrigerated truck to show up at that time. We were FedExing a couple pounds of cheese at a time out. So it was a better fit actually for the sales of Jasper Hill. And so we decided to make that co-branded product and to kind of keep the momentum going. And its first year on the market as a co-branded product in 2006, took a couple of years of R&D. It won Best of Show at the American Cheese Society. So that's like winning the Super Bowl your first year as a team. It was a wild opportunity. And so they went from being this cute little farmhouse operation to having won this major award with Cabot. And then all of a sudden they had a pathway to get enough weight to build a pallet. Like if you win the American Cheese Society Award, it basically means you can sell all of this cheese behind me in a given year. And the running joke of the ACS is that no one ever has the cheese to back up the win. It basically means that that cheese is sold out for the next 2 years straight. And Andy and Mateo were savvy enough to understand this, even though they were just getting into the biz. And they started using dynamite to blast out the backyard to make bigger caves before they had even finished the architectural plan for the building that I'm in. So they did not sleep on the opportunity. And it was much easier to get investors and bank loans, having won the award with Cabot, which is of course the most reliable name in New England in cheese, than it would have been for just two yahoos with 40 cows to make this big of an investment. So our partnership with Cabot really allowed us to broaden our impact and to go from a single model for value-added agriculture to a piece of infrastructure that could support our dairy industry in our region more broadly. So for instance, we've been able to build a second creamery in addition to our original one. You can see we just renovated our original creamery to have these beautiful copper-lined vats imported from France. They were used to make Comté. Now we're making our raw milk cheeses, Alpha Tolman and Whitney in them. And we have a secondary creamery where we're making our soft cheeses like Harbison, Willoughby, Moses Sleeper, Little Hosmer. So we've been able to grow and specialize because of the momentum that Clothbound has made for us. Also, having a pallet to sell with a base weight of the Clothbound cheddars is how we started working with GFI in the first place. We were actually able to have enough cheese on hand at any given time to make that relationship worth it. And so the opportunity to work with companies like GFI just opened up this whole world to us and allowed us to really scale our impact, as we said. So now we have a whole collection of cheeses that we really consider to be anchored by our cheddars. So the cool little raw milk cheeses, the tasty little soft cheeses that we make would not be possible without the cheddar. And so our most excellent partners like GFI have worked with us to really continue to grow the sales for our cheddars in order to allow us to diversify our collection and make our whole portfolio of our European natural rind cheeses. So that's enough of the share. That kind of gives you an idea of what we're up to. And then here we are in the main vault. So this is one of 7 caves. 2 of them are dedicated to cheddar, and then the others have different styles of cheese in them. So we have a bloomy rind vault, we have a little soft wash rind vault, etc. So the way that this works is that Cabot is making this cheese for us from their local Northern Vermont milk supply. They have a few different facilities where they're making cheese, but Clothbound cheddar is the only round wheel they make anymore. And we get 100% of this cheese. So they're making these round wheels, they call them flats, just for Jasper Hill, in the plant 10 miles up with the local milk supply. And so we'll wait till we've got kind of a truckload ready to go, and they all arrive at the same time. So behind me, you can see relatively young batches. See, I can point it right at the wheel here, give you a closer look. So these are little baby wheels. They've just been introduced to the cellars, and what Cabot will do is fill the stainless steel molds with curds that have been lined with a muslin cloth. And then they'll ripen them for a few months in their facility along with the rest of the cheese that they would have. And then once we have enough to bring a truck here, we'll get them all out of their packages, put them on the shelf, and coat them with lard, which is a traditional method of caring for a Clothbound cheddar. So we have these giant crock pots, very high tech. We melt lard in them, we paint it on with paintbrushes, and we apply an extra layer of cloth that you can see to the top and the bottom to make it a little bit more resilient. And then we put this cute little stick underneath, and that helps create continuous airflow so that that sticky lardy cloth doesn't stick to the board and pull away from the cheese and create pockets for mold and mites to get into the paste itself. So this really helps create a more resilient rind. So when they have the sticks like this, we're turning them by hand pretty frequently. And then once they have sort of, they've developed a little bit more, I'm not gonna go too far. Let me know if I start to break up a little bit into the bunker. I'm like 30 feet underground here. It's a wonder we have Wi-Fi at all. And here we are at a more mature wheel. So this is maybe 4 or 5 months later, and that fluffy mold has fully covered the cheese. And then it start to like evolve and sort of age out of that fluffy phase. And now it's looking more rugged and mature. It's drier to the touch, and the mold has kind of like sloughed off. So you can actually see the thread count of the cloth again. And this is much more typical of what the appearance would be when the cheese is ready to be wrapped and sold. So most of this cheese gets sold wrapped in cheese paper in whole wheel form, goes through the distribution network like that, and then is cut at the store level. Some excellent partners like GFI may be doing some pre-cuts for you on this, but typically this is a whole wheel product. This story of how this ripening works is really similar to the karst. One other thing to note is these don't have their sticks anymore. They're no longer sticky, and they're a little bit more resilient. And then at this point, we have a robot that comes in here, and it's a Swiss awesome piece of technology. It's like this big column, and it has a little conveyor belt arm that goes out with a laser beam eyeball, finds a wheel, like gives it a little bump, pulls it off the shelf, takes it inside, gives it a scrubbing, turns it over, and puts it back on the shelf. And it can be kind of working on 2 at once so that it gets the wheel in the back. These are stacked 2 deep. So the robot really helps like cut down on the brute force it takes to take care of the cheese. We were wrecking people before that robot came, and we didn't have enough labor to keep up with keeping the cheese looking nice. We're in the middle of nowhere. And we had to limit the number of hours per day and days per week people could work in here with these cheeses because they were overdoing it. Anyway, so that's kind of the cycle of care and what's happening. It also loses like 15 to 20% of its moisture in here. So we're like bathing them with labor. We're losing a certain percentage, but what's also happening is we're getting a more cured texture. So it's going from sort of creamy and bland when we first receive it to being almost crystalline in texture, a more reduced flavor, really intensified flavors, and all of the flora that we've cultivated on the rind has contributed enzymes to the developing cheese beneath and created more complexity of flavor. So we're creating a more traditional style of cheese with more complexity of flavor. The trade-off is it's a whole lot more work. And there's obviously the overhead of this crazy facility to consider, but it makes the whole equation work for us. And generally, like this cheese is supporting a network of very small farms, 50 cows out on grass. And that's the highest echelon of perception of value of these natural rind cheeses is how we make that equation work for our agricultural community. It's a really cool story, and Cabot has been like extremely supportive. All right, so Cabot clothbound, if you guys have that to taste, it should be bright and tangy. Might have like a pineapple fruit note to it. That's often a flavor profile that we get, pineapple-y. It should also have like brown butter and caramelized sweetness. It's not gonna have the struck match like sulfur and bitter notes that are associated with the New England white cheddar. So the rest of the cheese that Cabot makes is like classic New England sharp cheddar. And this profile is meant to be very different from that. And also a departure from the classic British imported flavor profile, which tends to be really like horseradishy and musty. It's delicious and beautiful in and of itself, but we wanted to create something that was unique and a little more suited towards an American palate, which likes those sweet, nutty, toasted almond, butterscotchy flavors. So the flavor profile can sometimes read as like Parmigiano Reggiano, sometimes more like an aged Gouda for the sweeter batches, but it should be very approachable, snacky, crystalline texture. You can almost grate it, especially if you've let it kind of air out a little bit. Okay, the Vault 5, do I still have a few more minutes here, Nathan? Yeah, all right.
Yes.
So I could go all day, obviously, love cheese. So the Vault 5 is super cool. How long is the cheese age? The first wheel from the one I'm in front of. Okay, so there's probably from this little spotty baby here, who's just starting to get its first dap. It's like its awkward teenage phase. This is going to be within probably 8 to 10 weeks in the caves. And then we're looking here at another 4 months of age on it. And this is sort of a stable appearance. Like it's pretty subtle differences in what it looks like from here to when we would sell it a few months later. But basically we'll get this cheese anywhere from 2 to 4 months old, and then we'll ripen it up until a total age of 10 to 12 months. Sometimes batches and we don't just wait for a timer to go off and say like, ding, ding, pick it up, time to sell it. We actually taste through every batch. We have one wheel that will plug. We stick a trier in, take out a little taste, and then we evaluate where it is in its ripening trajectory. And that's why these two are so different in age next to each other. When one batch gets sold, we remove it and we put a fresh batch in its spot. So they're sort of, the age profiles are sort of sprinkled around at this point. But we sell on taste, not on time. So some batches are amazing at 8.5 months, and we can tell it's not going to peak and get much better. Like this is the moment for this batch of cheese. Another batch might take 10 months before it reaches that perfect point. So, you know, between the 8.5 to 12.5 month point is where we're selecting for sales. The Vault 5 is super cool because, it's the karst. So the karst is GFI's exclusive cheese, and we're selecting karst from our inventory of cave age blocks to meet GFI's preferred profile, which is very cool. And so it's a double selected cheddar. And the reason for that is we actually get to go to Cabot's inventory and taste through their ripening of a different cheese that they're selling otherwise in the market. And we're selecting batches that fit a profile that we know are going to cave age well. And so we're bringing in those 40-pound blocks and we're larding them up just like a cloth-bound cheddar, only there's no cloth. And we can do that because they spend less time here. It's the only cheese in our inventory that we actually get to select and go pick out the batches that we want. Otherwise, we take 100% of the production, like cloth-bound, the good batches, the just whatever batches, like we take them all and we figure it out later. Sometimes they get shredded instead of getting sold as whole wheels to a premium market. So we sort of commit to like the good and the bad and the everything. And it's usually pretty good because Cabot has their routines worked out really well. So that works, but it's also just like a really nice departure for us to get to go cherry pick somebody else's inventory, choose our favorite blocks, bring them in and cave finish them. So they might be 6 to 8 months old when we get them, and then we cave finish them for 3 or 4 months. So we're still ending up at the same age profile of right around a year old at sales, like 10 to 12 months. But the time in the caves versus in Cabot's inventory is inverted. So that means that karst has a little bit easier price point than the Cabot cloth-bound cheddar because there's less time spent in the vaults. It's also a much more efficient cheese for Cabot to make. The round wheels just take a lot more. It's more high touch, it's more labor, and it's a more dedicated part of the facility. And so by being able to make the 40-pound blocks that end up as karst, that's already like it comes into us at a slightly lower price point. So it's we consider it a great gateway cheese to the family of cave-aged cheddar. And so karst is a great place to start. And then once you've got somebody on board with that, those like earthy flavors that go along with that butterscotch sweetness, then you might introduce them to Cabot cloth-bound next. So they complement each other really well. And then, like I said, we've got developing batches of these 40-pound blocks that we've selected, and then we go ahead and select from that inventory for the karst profile for GFI, which is super cool. So it's kind of like the best of the best. All right.
Hey, Zoe, Nathan here. What are some of your favorite pairings with these cheeses? Do you have anything that you've tried that you would suggest other people, and for our cheesemongers out there looking to help sell, these guys and do a little cross-selling, what would you pair with these?
Oh, I thought you'd never ask. Okay, so both of these cheeses are marked by a sweetness, which you don't find in all cheddars. It's more common in like I mentioned, an aged Gouda family, and a little bit of sweetness and a total lack of bitterness, which is something that is a normal attribute of other cheddars, means that you can go hoppy with this cheese. So IPAs are notoriously difficult to pair because blue cheeses, soft cheeses, regular cheddars have a note of bitterness that's in balance when you're tasting the cheese alone, but when you pair it with any bitterness in a beverage, it becomes overwhelming. It wrecks your palate. That's all you get. And with a cheese that has some sweetness like this, it can stand, and like the intensity of flavor and the depth of flavor, it can really stand up to it, like an ale and a hoppy one. So that's a fun pairing. Also, cheddar and apples is classic. You hear that a lot. So apple compotes and hard ciders are really nice with this. And in this case, because these have sweetness, I would go with a quite dry cider. Tends to be a really nice pairing. And gosh, what else? Whiskeys and bourbons are really interesting pairings, and again, the sweetness helps kind of tame the intensity of a spirit. So you can go in a lot of fun directions with it. Also, we have an orange marmalade made with single malt Scotch. It's a preserve that's kind of custom made to pair with Cabot Clothbound, and it's excellent. You bring in a little bit of bitterness on the rind of the orange, and then the like deep vanilla flavors from the Scotch, and the pairing's incredible. All right. Also charcuterie, classic plowman approach, like cured meat and clothbound cheddars you can't miss.
Awesome. Thank you very much. Let me get my pen here. So Zoe, thank you so much. That was amazing. Everybody, Zoe is going to hang on until the end of the program. If you have more questions, if you haven't asked yet, or there's something that you have a burning question, you can hold on to it and ask later, or again, hit it up in that chat. We want to make sure everybody gets a chance to learn exactly what they want to learn out of this, but that was amazing. Next up is Pat Ford from Beehive Cheese Company, and he is going to walk us through the amazing cheeses that he has as well. So welcome, Pat.
Thank you, Nathan. And I'm so excited to be here, you guys. And I'm so excited to follow Zoe. She's one of my idols in the cheese industry. We've been working together since about 2007, when she was way back at Murray's Cheese in New York City. So anyway, learn a lot from Zoe every time we listen to her. Pairings. I was on a road trip last weekend in Montana with my father, doing a fishing trip and seeing the amazing leaves. And we had a block of the karst cheese, and we made a sourdough grilled cheese sandwich. And it was probably the best grilled cheese I've ever eaten. So it was amazing. But our cheese journey has been so much fun, and it's so fun to meet you guys. It's unfortunate that we're not in person, but we'll get there eventually. And I love GFI, and they're putting on these IDFs because we all get to learn from each other and talk. And so please ask questions, raise your hand, do the chat. But our journey in cheese started with my brother-in-law calling me up in 2005, 2004, saying, let's quit our jobs and go make cheese. And we both got a pretty good chuckle out of that. And he was a software guy. I was a real estate guy. And we signed up for a 4-day short course in cheese making up at Utah State. We went up and made cheese for 4 days, and we wrote a business plan, and we quit our jobs and we started making cheese. It was amazing. And we went to our families and said, do you have any money to invest? Because you may never see it again, but we need to build a creamery, and we're probably not going to get paid for a couple of years. And it was just kind of a crazy thing to do, but we wanted to bring back the local creamery. I remember when the Cabot Clothbound won Best of Show, and I remember having a family party and eating that cheese and saying, wow, if we could make a cheese like this, that would be amazing. About that time, Utah State, they're a big ag school, and part of their charter is to transfer technology to the private sector. They called us up. It literally was the same day that we had that party and we were enjoying that cloth-bound cheddar. They said, would you commercialize our recipe? And they gave us our promontory, which is the first cheese that we'll taste. They gave us that recipe. That is the cheese that they had been working on for like 60 years. It's just a nice Irish style cheddar. And like Zoe said, it has a little bit of a sweet note. we have a bacteria that we introduce. It's a Helveticus bacteria. And for some reason, us Americans really like a little bit of a sweet note. So go ahead and let's taste the promontory. And I would love to get your comments because it's hard just talking to a computer screen. But we love promontory. It's kind of funny. I'll go to like the fancy food show and people always ask, what's new? What's new? What's new? And I'll say, well, promontory, and I'll hand them a little piece of promontory and they'll taste it and they'll say, oh, I've never had that one. I love that one. Promontory is our most award-winning cheese. People don't know us for our promontory. They know us for our flavored cheeses. But the fact that we have a really great base cheese makes it so that we can make a good cheese. Gordon Edgar is a cheesemonger in California. He was a judge and we won, and we were going to be on the Today Show and we needed a quote from somebody. And he said, Pat, it's one of the few cheeses with stuff on it that doesn't suck. And so coming from Edgar, that's a real compliment, but it's got to be a good base cheese. Otherwise, we wouldn't be able to put different seasonings on the outside. But here we are. We started making cheese in 2005. There are amazing white cheddars out there, right? So we needed to do something a little bit more interesting or we wouldn't be around. And so in about February, after we started making cheese in September, we were just kind of goofing around one day, and Tim, my business partner, he said, what about you put cream in coffee? Why not put coffee on cream? And we thought, oh, that'd be fun. And so we started making like mud balls with coffee and smearing it on the cheese. And then we tried doing dry and we started doing all these weird things. So that was his experiment. And the experiment that I did that day is I took some honey and some salt, because we're from Utah. We're the beehive state. We've got the Great Salt Lake. We've got a ton of bees. We're known for our bees in Utah. And so I thought, hey, maybe a salt and honey rub. So I did that. He did the coffee and lavender rub, and we kind of forgot about him for a while. And before I go on, I'm going to back up. If you don't have good milk, you don't end up with good cheese. And so when we first started, that was a huge barrier for us, because here we are, two guys from Utah, never made cheese. We go to these dairies and we say, hey, can we buy your milk? And they look at us kind of funny, like, do you promise me you're going to show up every day? Because I'm milking every day. Do you promise me you're going to pay me even though you're going to age your cheese for 5 months to 8 months before you can even sell it? And oh, by the way, I've got a 2-year contract with Dairy Farmers of America. So we were not really making a lot of progress. So we ended up going up to Logan, Utah, about an hour north of here. There's an amazing Swiss cheese maker called Gosner. And we met with them. We presented our business plan. We described to them what we were doing. And she says, I like you guys. You've had success in previous lives, and I'm going to take a chance on you. So we grabbed our ag inspector. We told him we wanted Jersey cow milk and we wanted it close. And he smiled, and we took a field trip out to Wade's Dairy, and we've been buying their milk ever since. The beautiful thing about buying that milk is if we decided to not even make cheese next week, all of that milk would end up going to Gosner, and we could just take the week off. Unfortunately, we don't have the luxury of taking a week off because we have demand, but it was really important in the first days because I'd make cheese on 3 days a week and then go do farmers markets and then fly somewhere and go try to sell some cheese. And so it was just the two of us and our kids. And so it was really nice to have that luxury of not having to buy every drop of milk that they were making. But good milk makes for good cheese. We bring in our milk in the morning. We do 4 batches a day. And by the time we clean up at night, that milk is made into cheese. We get a tanker the next day and we start all over. So our milk never sits around for more than about 8 hours. So that's good. So going back to Barely Buzzed and Sea Hive, the 2 experiments that we did, We put them aside. And in fact, I just found this picture. So this is when we first started, and you can see these were our barely buzzed wedges right here, open air aging on the walls in our caves. And if any of you guys have ever been to Utah, the humidity outside today is about 24%. And in the winter, it can be in the single digits. And so that is not conducive to open air aging. We ended up with fissure cracks in our cheese the size we could put our thumbs in. There was just no way to put enough moisture in the cave for them to age. And so necessity is the mother of invention. We said, if we can't be Mother Nature, let's join her. And we made a delicious base cheese. We started rubbing stuff on the outside, and then we cryovac them down. It's kind of like a sous vide. Those flavors have nowhere to go but inside the cheese. And because it's a Jersey cow milk cheese and there's a ton of cream, those creams readily accept those flavors. We rub those cheeses the day we make it, package it down, and age it. So we forgot about these two cheeses until about July, and we had a family party. And out comes the 3-pound wheel of barely buzzed. We hadn't even named it yet. Then a 3-pound wheel of Sea Hive. And we tasted both of them and we loved them. We thought, this tastes really good. So the next week we had Portland American Cheese Society, and we took our cheese up to Portland, and we were just kind of doing some peer review. And a guy from Central Market in Texas tasted the cheese, and he on the spot ordered a whole bunch of cheese. It was like 70 wheels. And for us, that was a ton of cheese. And so we went back, started making cheese. We rubbed them up and sold them. And from the very first batch of cheese, we pulled out a wheel, because one of the rules at the American Cheese Society is you have to be in distribution for a year before you can enter it into competition. And so we entered the barely buzzed in the competition, and we end up with first place. And it was just so crazy, because one of the judges came up to Tim after, and he was an English judge, and he said, I didn't want to have to taste that cheese. Then I didn't want to have to like that cheese. And then most of all, I didn't want to give it first place, but you gave me no other choice. And so it was just so cool to have somebody basically have this new experience. We all love to see people have new experiences for the first time. And because it had never been done, it just wasn't okay. When we told Utah State that we were rubbing coffee on cheese, they said, you cannot do that. And we said, why? And they said, because they gave up all this scientific stuff. And we're like, well, taste it. And they tasted it. It was an 8-month-old cheese. They loved it. They're like, okay, whatever. It's really good. So anyway, that's what launched us. Sea Hive at the same time is honey and salt. We all get, when we get a new electronic, there's always a little bag in the electronics. Those are desiccants to pull the moisture out of the electronic. Well, both salt and honey are both desiccants, and they pull a lot of liquid out of the cheese and they dry it out. And it's kind of interesting. I'll talk about Sea Hive just because we're not going to sample it today, but sometimes people get in their head that it's going to be savory and sweet. But think about the bacteria in cheese. They have no restraint. They love sugar. They eat the lactose, the sugar in cheese. We give them extra honey. It's not going to be sweet, because those bacteria are going to eat those honeys and convert them to lactic acid. So the Sea Hive actually has a little bit more acid than a typical cheddar, and the salt just balances everything out. But it's really interesting that people get in their head they're going to have it a certain way, and it turns out differently, and it's kind of delightful for them. But let's taste the barely buzzed. And the way I like to taste it is I like to cut off a little piece, and don't eat the rind yet. Just eat the paste of the cheese first. Are you getting the creamy, nutty, brothy coffee notes in the paste of the cheese? It goes all the way to the center of the cheese. Then I eat the whole thing with the rind. Coffee can. Do you have a question? Maybe not. Okay, he's just putting a thumbs up. Sometimes coffee can be bitter, right? And so Tim thought maybe we can round out the bitterness of the cheese with a little bit of hint of floral. We get organic blossoms, lavender blossoms, and our coffee comes from Tim's brother. He roasts the coffee. We get it. It's in Grand Junction, Colorado, is where he roasts it. And then the day we're going to make the barley buzz, we grind the coffee and the buds together through our burr grinder, and we have fresh coffee. We rub it on the cheese, and then we age it that way. But barley buzzed, this one is, I went on a road trip down the West Coast to a bunch of wineries when we first started making this cheese. And I visited about 20 wineries, and about 14 of them had our cheese already. And I'm like, this is awesome. I don't even have to go out to sell our cheese. But the word had gotten out that the barley buzzed is insanely good with a medium red wine, a Pinot. It just makes the lavender pop. It's an amazing pairing. So the barley buzzed is really what put us on the map. Any questions?
Pat, were you the first to commercially use coffee as a rub on the cheese?
Yes, I would say yes. But that being said, I ran into a really old, literally like a 80-year-old, 90-year-old Colombian woman. And she says, I used to have this when I was a little girl in Colombia. So I had never heard that, but we were the first to really start rubbing cheese with different, with coffee for sure. We were.
Interesting.
Okay, other questions, you guys, before we keep going? Just keep writing them in the chat if you do. So one of our criteria, I love Robert with Cypress Grove. They don't call it flavored cheeses, they call it seasoned cheeses. When we first started making rubbed rind cheeses, again, they were a little bit out of the norm. People weren't quite used to seeing it. And in a lot of cases, people were covering up a mediocre cheese if they were putting a bunch of paprika or ghost peppers or whatever on them. After all, Mary Quick from Quick's Cheddar in England, she gave us a huge compliment at the American Cheese Society one year. She said, Pat, I love your cheeses because they're balanced. You're buying cheddar, you're buying cheese, and you just happen to accentuate this cheese in a lovely way by adding a little bit of this or that. And so that's a huge compliment to me. I don't want to have it just in your face, Cajun or whatever. We want it to just be subtle. So when we make a cheese and we taste it for the first time, if people are not grabbing for it to taste the second sample or doing a backhand spring, we throw it in the take home bin and then we call it good. But our Queen Bee Porcini, which is the last cheese that we'll taste today, Oliver, our son, this was his creation. And I love this cheese because of its earthiness, umami. It's just a lovely cheddar. It reminds me of a cave aged in spite of our not having a true cave like Zoe does. So let's taste this and give me some comments on this. I did a judging at the Fushan 555 once, and my partner Tim said, Pat, you can't just moan and say, oh, that's good. But if you're moaning and eating a piece of cheese and you're saying, wow, that's really good. I love that. I love this cheese. Last year, we entered this at the World Cheese Awards in Spain, and it hadn't happened in 2 years. And we brought home the only super gold by a US producer last year. And so that was super, super exciting for us to be able to do that. But what we've really done is we've had a lot of fun doing different rubs on the cheeses to create, we have about 9 cheeses that we sell. They all are derived from Promontory, our base cheese. And I didn't tell you, but Promontory Point, where the 2 railroads met in 1869, the Southern Pacific and the Union Pacific Railroad, is right next to our dairy, just out west. So we wanted to give homage to the Promontory Point, so that's why we call it Promontory. But questions, you guys. We'll have questions at the end, but Family Creamery Camille. My daughter's sitting here, and these guys were little kids when we first started making cheese, and now they're running the company, and it's pretty dang fun to watch these guys sell the cheese and have fun doing what they're doing. But I'll cut it off at that, Nathan, and then we'll
Pat, there's one more question that was typed in here. There's comments afterwards, but the question for you is, we're in a very humid environment with mold appearing in the rind very quickly, even when it's cut and wrapped properly. Is there any can't clean the mold out of the coffee grinds? Do you have any suggestions?
Yes, cut it small and sell it fast. I mean, that sounds like I'm cheating, but when I used to sell this cheese to Murray's, I don't know if you remember this though, but I sold this cheese to Murray's, our Barely Buzzed. They put it in the cave, it turned powder sugar white. And they sold it initially that way, and it freaked people out. They don't like the mold. But if you've left coffee grounds in the coffee maker over the weekend, they turn white. It's just a naturally occurring mold. It's not bad. You can wipe it down. None of us have time to rewrap cheese. That's almost impossible to do. Rub it down with a teeny bit of vinegar and a rag, and it'll be fine. But a little spot of little mold is not going to hurt anything. It tastes just fine, even if it's completely covered with that mold.
Yeah, and something I've done on the cheese counter is making sure wrapping it very tightly, really quickly after opening. That was the best thing I could do when I was on the counter.
Yep. And cool. Obviously, if there's a cooler part of the cooler, keep it there and not a kind of up high where it's a little bit warmer and whatnot. But yep.
Excellent. Well, thank you very much, Pat. That was amazing. Okay, we are rolling through the day. We're tasting cheddars. Now it's time for a break from cheese for a little while, and let's try some ham. I was telling the presenters earlier today, my coworkers make fun of me a little bit because for me, ham is a 2-syllable word. It's just that amazing. So I'm going to welcome to the stage, so to speak, here, Maja Freij. Let me get your pin put on. There we go. You are bright, taking over the screen, and welcome. I can't wait to hear.
Hello, everyone. Can you see my screen?
We can see you, yes.
Maja.
Oh, you can see my screen? The screen looks better than me. There you go. Hi, everyone. My name is Maja. I work for Les Trois Petits Cochons, or 3 Little Pigs, which I'm sure most of you know. And I had shared with Pat and Zoe before, my next life should be cheese. I love cheese. But we will have a little bit of difference now. Let me tell you a little bit about 3 Little Pigs. Started in 1975 as a very small charcuterie shop in New York City by those 2 French chefs who came to the States to open a restaurant with no money. And so they thought of opening a little French takeout in the village, which got discovered very quickly by very famous food critics who wrote about this little hole in the wall making amazing pate, I'm sorry, making amazing pates. And they got a couple of write-ups in the New York Times and the LA Times, and that pushed them to close that little shop 2 years later to start wholesale. And their mission from day one was to make clean product as you cook at home. No preservatives, no additives, it's clean and wholesome. And at the time, all natural was huge, as organic or ABF is now. So they did not want to introduce any of that product into the pates. They proved their success by winning over 21 awards from different food associations, mainly the Fancy Food Association. The best one I like is product line. We won that in the late 1999, I think. And it was amazing that everything we sent for the competition won. And that was really an amazing award we have. So I crack a joke all the time because we display all these awards on top of our coolers at every show. And I tell everyone we have a machine at the plant. Every time we make a pate, we make an award with it. 25 years later, I want to say 20 years later, we decided to make a ham. And the owners being French, they wanted to do a French style ham, which is, it's made of a 3-muscle ham cooked in its own juice. What we do is we take these 3 mussels and we inject with a brine and spice. We do less than 10% of water to inject the spices in. We tumble the product, those mussels, for about 18 hours to tenderize them. And then after 18 hours, they tumble very slowly. And we take the meat out and put it in a plastic mold, seal it, and cook it sous vide. So we've been doing sous vide product forever, but the owner will never let us say sous vide because he was afraid everyone will steal the idea from him. And that produced 6 months shelf life to the product from date of production, which is amazing. So after we did this ham, it was very successful, and GFI is the first distributor, the top distributor for us, and definitely with any new product, the first distributor definitely will take it, and they're doing a great job with it. So years later, I want to say before maybe 5 years ago, we decided to move on and produce this product in a slicing format. Now, okay, 1 second, please. Okay, so we came out with the same ham made in a slice. We had to change the procedure. So when we slice, we had to make the same thing, tumble the meat with the spices and then stuff it in a casing. I want to go back and say one word about the bulk ham. We do 200 hams a batch. So it's a lot of handwork. It's all made by hand. We cannot use the same process with the slicing because we have to send it to a slicing company to make it all the same size and symmetrical and all that. So we stuff this meat in a casing and after tumbling, and we send it out for slicing and HPP, which is high pressure pasteurization for the shelf life. So when you open this ham, let's start with the first one, the jambon de Paris. Please taste it. And while you're separating the slices, you might feel that it's sticking a little bit together because of the HPP causes that. Otherwise, you know, with the packaging we have, this is the only way we could produce ham with 6 months shelf life from date of production. I want to taste the ham with one of the cheeses you guys were talking about earlier, and I'm sure it's going to taste amazing. The French people love the ham on a baguette with some butter, good butter, and a piece of cornichon, and it's really a great product. So this, when we first produced the regular traditional sliced flavor, we decided to add to it, and we did a rosemary ham, where when we tumble the meat, we add rosemary to it and it tumbles for 18 hours. So the flavor and the aroma from the rosemary gets into the meat, and it's absolutely delicious. Not very pungent, but you can feel the aroma of the rosemary and very appetizing. So please try to taste it while we're talking about it. And if you have any questions or feel about it, let me know. Are you guys having problems separating the slices? nice. No one responded, so it means that's a positive thing. And then the best thing, we co-branded with Mike's Hot Honey for innovation. And I thought, wow, this is like a bad idea. A hot honey with ham, something I will never go for. And I'm finding out it's everybody like perks up with that. Everyone is loving it. So when you taste, with same procedure, tumbling the meat, we infuse it with the hot honey, and then we add a little bit of habanero powder for the kick. So when you taste this product, you feel the sweetness, and at the very, very end, you feel a little kick of the habanero. You're on mute, Nathan.
Amazing.
Yeah, so everywhere I've done many presentations and tastings for distributors, everybody loves this product. And this is the one I thought nobody is gonna like, because in my mind, hot honey and ham is not a good combination, but they proved me wrong. And coming up, and we also have, I'm sorry, I forgot to talk about the smoked ham. We also have a slice with, we smoke the ham a little bit and produce it as well in a sliced format. Those 3 items are available for sale, and GFI already distribute to Whole Foods the one flavor. Hopefully we're gonna get another flavor. And other than Whole Foods, a lot of other regions, other customers are buying as well. So you guys, did you taste the jambon fumé?
Yeah, so what we've got is the jambon Paris cooked uncured French recipe. And then the other one is all natural uncured sous vide ham. And the Mike's Hot Honey.
You didn't get the rosemary?
We did not
No.
get the rosemary. It's the uncured sous vide and the French.
Oh, I'm sorry. I don't know
And
how this happened, but there must have been a mistake at shipping, because I wanted you to taste the rosemary, because this is a great, great product. Hopefully next time we could do it, but I apologize for that.
We'll have to have you on again and send out more ham.
That's it.
We can fix that easily.
That's
Maha,
it.
the
It's really a
sous
great
vide was
product.
outstanding.
I'm sorry, I didn't hear you.
Maha, the sous vide was outstanding.
Yeah.
Tremendous flavor.
Yeah, so yeah, it's working well. And I know that the rosemary and the hot honey are gonna be definitely the top sellers in the new flavors.
And the rosemary is very good. I was lucky enough to get to try it at GFI's last food show in Florida, where I got to try all these hams. And kind of like how the Mike's Hot Honey is not overpowering, like it's not like the honey and the heat just own the whole show. It's the same thing they've done with the rosemary. So in my opinion, you can taste the sweet, delicious ham. You get the meat, and the rosemary is more of an accent to it. So you do get that rosemary flavor, but it's not like that overpowering ownership of it. I think it's a great blend and definitely worth trying.
I'm gonna suggest any of the participants who are interested in tasting this product, I'll be more than happy if you reach out to us, and I will send you samples to try. And I apologize, had I known that you did not receive those, I would have resent them again. But yeah, let me know when you like to taste them, and I will be happy to send.
Excellent.
Okay, any questions?
Well, all right. Are there any questions for the entire group? This was, to me, an amazing class. A lot about cheddar, a lot about ham. Learning that, that Three Little Pigs was the, began sous videing before anybody else. Like, that's pretty freaking cool. And the quality of the meat, but also the quality of all these amazing cheeses that we're trying. Before you guys go off and rush off into your fourth quarter holidays, the madness that's gonna happen, just know that all of us out there, thank you for working so hard inside stores, working inside whatever roles you do, whether you're making cheese, selling cheese, buying cheese. Thank you all. We are a community designed to help and lift each other up here in the States. And if we work together to promote great quality products and sell those, then we're going to have great quality food to eat. So thank you to everybody out there. A side note, I did add a couple of surprises. You've got McCall, you should have McCall's grass-fed Irish chive cheddar. This isn't a star of the show, but just wanted to offer you a cheese with some stuff in it. You know, we've got a great rub with the beehive cheeses, but something a little chive option, just a little surprise for you. And then I added in the Two's Company seeded flatbreads. These are different. I'm going to go ahead and tell you, but I think they add like a little bit more umami flavor to some of these cheddars, which I hope you enjoy all that. And I'm going to give one more time, see if anybody else out there has a question, comment. The source, we got a question, Maja.
Yes.
As far as where do you source your pork? Leaf says in Pennsylvania.
Yes. As much as we can in Pennsylvania, we like to source local, and of course, for Whole Foods, it's a different story because we have to source from approved vendors by Whole Foods. So
Excellent. And like they're supporting local. And I think and Zoe didn't have enough time today to talk about all the local stuff that happens in Vermont with Jasper Hill, but all of these producers focus local, quality. Let's sell quality and grow as a food service industry together. I look forward to seeing you all hopefully next year with some more IDFs, but thank you all for joining us. If you have any questions or comments, or let me make sure I put my email up. If you have anything that you need to discuss about this training, about your delivery, let me know directly. And I want to thank Gourmet Dash for shipping all these out. But thank you all very much. I hope you have a very wonderful day and a very successful fourth quarter.
yes.
Thank you guys.
Bye.
And everything is recorded and will be on the Institut du Fromage YouTube page. So if you came in late, Institut du Fromage YouTube. Bye, guys.
Bye. Bye.
Bye-bye.